this time I'll call to order the November 14th, 2023 York County Council Workshop. Right before I walked into this meeting, I was advised by management that they would request that we entertain a motion to take the items out of order since we have a consultant here to bring us some information regarding the coroner facility. And this is, I do want to, some council members have asked me if there's been an update that's been provided since our retreat, and it is not. I've not been provided anything. We'll all be hearing this at the same time when we get this now. Is there a motion so that we can call that out of order?
So moved. Yes, second.
Motion and second. Any discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Hearing none, we will move now to discussion regarding a design contract for the new coroner facility. David, do you want to lead us in that?
Yeah, I'm going to turn it over to Mike, but I'll just introduce the topic. It's as the chair said, we did discuss this during our retreat, and actually put a capital budget line item in our budget for this. It is what we'd like to get eventually approved is the contract for the design and for the selection of this site, which we already own. So Mike's going to give some detail on that and then turn it over to our consultant. So I'll let you go ahead and
Yes,
kick it off.
so we had discussed this, I think, at the retreat, the last time we had a council discussion. Some options were considered: buy an existing facility, look for what's out there in the commercial market, and then we identified a potential site that county already owns that could be suitable. We did look at a number of facilities. As some of you may recall, the 236 North Park was considered for coroner, but had some limitations in terms of access, siting, and this facility is shown to be that we've, like I said, already own it. B, there's security around it, and there's parking and logistics, and it's close to a lot of things. We think it's a good fit for this particular facility. We've got our architect here, and as David mentioned, we will present this next agenda, our next council meeting as agenda item to approve the award of CPL as the architect to complete the design and then construction administration all the way through the project. So with that said, Rachel, I'll release you to provide an update. You do have a package in front of you that we'll go through. There has been some methodology already as to terms of requirements for coroner. Some of the discussion was, we already know coroner's kind of outgrown the current facility in terms of office and storage. There's also been some discussion regarding adding morgue space, and then future could be an autopsy suite. We don't recommend the autopsy suite at this time. That would be a future phase, but this site would allow for that growth should a future council decide to go that route. But it does allow for office, morgue space, and examinations and storage for all that. And allows them to be in one site, which is one of the biggest issues she had. She didn't want to be split in terms of two different locations.
Is there currently anything here? Is this just a piece of property?
It's an open site.
It's open site, okay.
And we have assessed it in terms of fit, which Rachel mentioned in terms of geotech. Would it be suitable? And from all accounts, it's a suitable site for this project. So that said,
All
how are
right.
you?
Thank you very much for having me. My name is Rachel Nilsson. I'm an architect, vice president at CPL. And so Mike did a great introduction for this project. I'll also note that our team performed a feasibility study for this project a couple of years ago, or starting a couple of years ago. And so a lot of what I'm showing you is coming from that feasibility study. We have not started any future work on this or further design on this project at this time. During that feasibility study, we went through their existing facilities, identified how they're using their facilities, identified future needs, and mapped out what those current needs are. What you're seeing here is kind of a mapping, what we call an adjacency diagram of understanding what are those needs that they have, and then how they might be located next to each other. The future needs are not necessarily shown on this one. Through that process, we then developed a conceptual floor plan. So this is, again, just phase one. And this took a couple additional items that arose, which was a cooler space, and not shown here is a freezer space, both of which are deemed to be needed items for phase one because of limitations at other facilities where those are housed. And again, this is again still from the feasibility, so we, in our scoping meeting for this project, for our design contract, we did meet with the team and identified some changes and adjustments to the program, actually reducing it a little bit to that would be implemented in the design phase. A future phase two, potential phase two, if this board elects to move forward with that, is about 4,200 square feet and is really just focused on autopsy areas. So that would be if York County decides to bring a pathologist or a pathologist to the county to perform autopsies here in York County as opposed to sending those elsewhere. Location advantages, again, touching base on what was mentioned already, this is a secure site. It is already owned by York County, so there are no land costs associated. It's in a pretty central location. Also pretty centrally located to where the coroner's office is today. And just of note that the architectural design would be complementary to the courthouse facility. It would be located, you can see that courthouse there, would be located behind the courthouse. There is a large amount of parking that's on site, not all of which is used for the courthouse. So there is additional parking on site that is available. Just recapping a little bit, the feasibility study took place between about 2021 to 2022. We did the programming, geotechnical was completed, concept design and budgeting for the project. During that time, we also looked at the additional sites that Mike mentioned. The current project, on September 18th, the council awarded RFQ 2885 to select CPL architects and engineers for design and bid documents. Our team met with engineering and staff to negotiate scope and fee. The project budget is $7 million. And then the schedule for this project is anticipated to be designed from about December 2023 to December 2024. And construction is anticipated for January 2025 to early spring 2026. Next steps, as was mentioned, to recommend approval of this agenda item for award of design contract at the November 20th council meeting.
Thank you, ma'am. We ended up taking it out at work because we had a consultant here just to bring us up to speed on this. It's the first time we've had some feedback since the retreat. Do we have any questions? Mr. Huckabee?
Questions? Thank you. Number one, do we have any members of the coroner's office in the audience tonight? Are they here? So they're not represented, okay. Have they seen what's being proposed? Did you have any input from them?
Yes.
You did?
Yes. We met with Rachel and us in the negotiation phase, and when Rachel mentioned we could consolidate some, the coroner was in agreement with.
Okay.
So they are aware, and they were actually involved in the selection process of this consultant.
Okay. And then when you mentioned the cooler and the freezer space, that's the morgue area, is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay, thank you. The building, phase one's 9,000 square feet.
Yes.
So with the infrastructure surrounding the building, we have a parking lot, we have a pad, we just have to build. Why is it $778 a square foot? What makes it so expensive?
So you're talking about that 7 million?
Yeah, 9,000 square feet, right?
Yeah, so the 7 million is a project budget, so that includes, and you can, but that includes generally moving costs, furniture costs, IT costs. It includes design fees, survey, geotech, things like that, not just construction costs for the project.
So it's ready to move in building at 778, basically.
Furniture,
Mhm.
furniture and
Yes, that would include all that.
IT is a good, significant part of that.
All right, you mentioned the autopsy suite might
How
be
many
a part of
does he
phase
get?
2.
We'll
which
give
is
him the floor, and then
4,200
I'll give you the
square
floor.
feet. Does this have a sally port
It is anticipated to have Sally Port
in phase 1?
in phase one
Okay.
because of the freezer and the cooler.
So I'm just curious, because when I met with the coroner's office in April twice, and Sabrina said that the autopsy suite would be about 1,000 square feet. Why would we go ahead, if it is 1,000, why would we go ahead and include that? Because we don't, maybe we don't want to get into forensic autopsies yet?
At the retreat, that was the conversation we had, is we were not prepared to get into the autopsy business at that time.
You need a forensic pathologist. My
That's a
understanding is
big
you needed a
expense,
forensic
yeah.
pathologist in order to make use of it, and that alone was $500,000.
Yeah, I'm
year
just wondering,
annual
it's only
expense.
1,000 square feet, why we wouldn't go ahead and finish that out in preparation for what's coming next. So that's a whole nother conversation about the forensic pathologist and whether that's a break-even expense or it's an expense.
I think it was.
I'm just questioning, if it's only 1,000 square feet, that's really the last phase, if I understand it correctly, that we'd be putting in. And I know we're saying 4,200 square feet for phase 2. Anyway, I'm just bringing that up because I know that as we move forward, if that's something you're interested in, that's something for council to discuss and learn more about.
Do we have any other questions from other council?
Yeah.
Ms.
Oh, go ahead.
Cloninger has
Okay.
asked for the floor.
So I had mentioned, when we talked about this before, I think it was at retreat that I asked for, other counties' buildings, what they have that's maybe around us or like about the same size as what we have currently, and I didn't get that. So is that something that we can get and take a look at, what other
Sure.
counties are
I
doing?
think we could, yes.
We've looked at some of those internally, but we can provide
I
that.
mean, yeah, as far as the final design, because what we would do is they would commence with the design, because certainly we could bring something back in terms of what proposals are in other counties.
Just curious as
Yeah.
what they have that they're doing.
Yeah, so I've got a couple quick questions on the layout of their, so going on site there, one of the biggest things that was, to me, was congested is the evidence room on there. How big is it marked out which rooms would be used for what okay. So the evidence room is double its size, triple its size, because they had stuff stacked on top of things stacked, yeah.
Yeah, I off the top of my head, I cannot remember their current evidence
Yeah.
room size, but we do. I mean, we put the program together, including the size of the room, in
Uh-huh.
conjunction with the team at the coroner's office
Okay.
to make sure that was sized appropriately. So I know it is larger than what they have now. I just can't remember.
How big is their current building right now? So are we doubling the
I
space right
think
now?
it's around 3,000 square feet.
3,000?
Remember, Rachel?
That's about
I think
right.
it's about 3,000
Yeah,
square feet.
okay. So we'll get double. And the other thing I did, and it was along the lines of a question that Debbie had. I know that we have other access to other buildings, so I'm just curious of what, I know this looks like a beautiful design, but I am interested in hearing what other locations we do have, and do we have an opportunity in our other buildings to meet the same needs, maybe save some dollars here for the taxpayers? So that would be my question. So.
In terms of other county facilities?
Yeah, county facilities or locations or buildings that we have access that may be generally the same size that we could retrofit. Because this is pretty hefty. I mean, as Watts was saying, this is a good chunk of money here. So I just really want to be conscious of this, as we move forward.
Okay.
Thanks, appreciate it.
Which I thought that the dog pound center would have been a place good for it. My question is it gonna have a fence around it?
Details like that are to be determined, but there would be secure parking. So there already is a gated access.
Well, I know when I took my visit, I was overwhelmed by the amount of drugs and all that was in that building. And no real security to amount to a lot.
Any other questions?
I guess I'll let everybody else speak since I came in late.
Why you always yield for me?
I'm not gonna say.
Oh, you're not
I
gonna
don't have a
say?
question.
You said no.
No. Oh, I'm,
Yeah, oh.
not, that's not holding.
Well,
She's saving it up.
okay, she's gonna let it build up. Now, I didn't know we were, I know we're not gonna get this on this November 20th meeting to go ahead, because I think we should just be kicking tires right now as to what we're gonna do. I think if we put this on the agenda and take this step, we're going down the road to saying, hey, we're gonna build a $7 million facility. I don't think this council is ready to make a move on that. I can't speak for everybody else, but I know I would be ready. When I say we're kicking tires, I was just first update to the whole group that we've had since our retreat. We had the conversations, we talked about some options, how we put back some capital, how we raise funds, how we get prepared for this. I don't think we're there yet with moving forward to pick up a $7 million price tag. It's gonna take a lot more of this in this setting. I don't care about the furniture type or whatever. I'm looking at this council approving such a large price tag and comparing it to what other counties similar in size. We don't always want to go for the Rolls Royce. We don't always want the kind of car that you've got to roll the windows up either. I think $7 million is a huge price tag. I think we need to be somewhere in the middle of the best that's out there, but we ain't gonna be the worst that's out there. You know, because we all spending taxpayer money. We got some huge, we have huge projects we gotta take on, from the corners, animal shelter, other needs. These things are gonna, price tags are gonna mount up with these different projects that we got coming, and we gotta not just work on single project alone. We gotta keep in mind, how are we gonna stack this money for other projects that are coming, that we know are coming down the pipeline. It's $7 million, the best we can do. If it is, then that's what we got to choose from, but if there's something that can get us there and serve our needs, and not be short-sighted, but not planning too far ahead, then I think that's where we kinda need to be looking with. That's a big price tag to walk in here tonight and see, hey, look, we're ready to put on the agenda to approve a design contract, and it's gonna be $7 million. Because once we approve the design contract and get all that going, how do we say no if it's not the right size, if it's not the right fit, if it's too big, price tag too big? So I'm not nowhere near saying let's put something on the agenda next Monday night and keep going. We need to have some more dialogue of what is the right size for York County. I think we can compare other counties similar in size to help us make that decision.
How much money do we have earmarked in our budget for this, Kevin? How much money is earmarked?
The budget, has $7 million spread over 3 years currently.
$7 million spread over 3 years?
Yes, sir.
This is part of the capital plan that's included that number?
Yes, sir.
What other options does council want, management to explore before we proceed? I mean, this is the first step, it's a design phase, and I know that I share the concern that it's been a while since we've heard anything, and we're putting it on the agenda. I appreciate you letting us know before it's on the agenda. I guess, are there any other alternatives that can be considered?
Well, I think it'd be worthwhile to talk about what we have done at the staff level. We had worked with a real estate agent about some commercial properties that we could buy and upfit. We identified a couple. We actually purchased one in Tech Park that we thought was a good fit. It turns out it really wasn't suitable to house a morgue facility, and the sheriff was very eager to utilize. We had that as a capital project as well, so we switched and let him use that building instead of the coroner. And so we have explored at options of purchasing, but the upfit costs are significant as well, particularly if you've got to add a morgue and you know, whatever design changes. We're spending a lot of money on the sheriff's facility to upfit that. So I don't know necessarily that, and we haven't found another suitable building for upfitting in the year's time that we've looked. But that is an option, and it potentially could save some money, but I don't wanna give council some unrealistic expectation that you can go buy $1 million building and that's what you'll have in it. So there are significant costs there. So I don't know, what other options you might like to see. We're happy to present those, but this is, it is consistent with the budget item we approved, or we included in this year's budget, approved in this year's budget. So we've been operating on the assumption that the $7 million was a number, a good budget number. So if that's not the case, then we probably need to shift gears and do something else. But I don't know what your lower cost options might be.
Is this project ahead of an animal shelter or behind it or at the same time?
They're both, and Kevin can speak to how they're budgeted, but I think they're to run in conjunction with each other.
So I would be interested, first, I would like to have I'm only talking because Bump left, a layout that we can read, because I don't know how many employees there are in the coroner's office, but there's a lot of office space here. It looks like more than the number of employees. I just can't read what these uses are. So that would be number one. But I think, I agree with what Tommy and Tom and Debbie have mentioned, and that is that maybe the animal control facility, since the animal shelter is outgrowing that facility, why would we not utilize that building and upfit that building? Because
Well, it's currently being used as an animal facility, so I mean, I guess you could put this one behind that, which would be a significant time switch for what we considered. It's not centrally located to the hospital, which is an important factor, and there'd be significant upfit costs there. We've not explored that, to be honest with you, because it's currently in use as an animal facility, and didn't consider it to be in the location it needs to be.
So if we were gonna vacate that building and put an animal shelter somewhere else, which is what has been discussed, I'd just be curious to know what the plans would be for that. What would the plans be for that building if we didn't put something, what would we do with that building, so?
I'm not an advocate, I'm not advocating for the coroner's office, but I am gonna say, when I joined council, like all of you, I went and did the tours, right? Asked a lot of questions, and this happened to be one that was coming up on our agenda, like the animal shelter. But if you haven't been to the coroner's office, you should take a visit. You've got 3 and 4 people in a 10 by 10 office on top of each other. Some are working out of the conference room. Some don't even come in because they don't have space to come in. They are out of space where they are, by far. I'm not even gonna get into, since we're in a public meeting, where some of their responsibilities reside. But I'm of the opinion this is of great need to resolve. Now, we're spending $7 million, that's what we budgeted. And we're pretty much getting everything but the autopsy room, because you gotta have space, you gotta have office space. She needs a sally port, that's where you drive inside the building, the door closes behind you, and do what you need to do so the public doesn't see what you have going on. And then right now, when you pass away, you're at the hospital. She's saying that she would like that to be on site, just creates more efficiency, right? And then ultimately, she wants an autopsy suite, so that bodies aren't going over to York Pathology at the hospital, they're not going to Charleston, sometimes Columbia, not often. That does require a specific pathologist, forensic pathologist. But I think the question is the coroner's office good with this? Are they good with what we're looking to vote on, and are y'all good with it? And if the coroner's office is good with this, and y'all are good with this, I don't see a lot of need in us holding us up on what ultimately needs to get done. That's my opinion.
Well, again, a $7 million price tag is a lot of change, absolutely a lot of change. And I feel it's critical we do our due diligence to look at all options. And I would like to see what the cost would be to retrofit that building, because if we are looking again to move the animal shelter into a new building, based on timing wise and everything, it may be something that we could coordinate and swing and save $3 million in the process. So again, I would like to see the numbers, at least so I can make a educated decision on that.
What
know?
would you need to do that?
We would
Mike?
need to.
Completely
we
change
need
the
to start
design
another
specs?
Contract and, they'll tell me.
Are you looking at engineering?
Yes.
Yeah, we would have to hire Rachel to, and she's familiar with the animal shelter, because did your firm work with Trey on that? She would have to look at the programming space on it and then do a probable cost. It's just, it's similar to what we've had her do that on a couple other, locations.
What kind of
other
time frame
corners.
does that change, and what kind of cost differential does that put us with in terms of design? Because council, I guess, when we approved the 918 approval, was that for the specific design specs?
It was for, we advertised, or procurement advertised for engineering and RFQ for, design of a coroner's facility, and council on the 18th approved CPL
With specific specs?
with not specific specs. When we do an RFQ, we're looking for the best qualified person to design a building, an architect to design a building. That's the step one. The next step would be the design contract, which is what we'd like to bring on the 20th of November.
I'm reading the room here, and without me even speaking up, it looks like if I support moving forward, there's still a majority of the council that has some questions about this, so I'm not sure how we move forward to evaluate the alternatives in a most appropriate manner.
If I could mention this, so animal control and this, in my opinion, are two separate issues. Because when we start digging into animal control, do we have a need? We have a need. What kind of need do we have? When over 90, and don't quote me on this, I'm going back to the notes, but I can't find where I had my specific notes, but over 90% of the dogs that we have housed in animal control aren't even adoptable. So why would we take 90% of dogs that are not adoptable at Fort Mill at high real estate cost and place them in a building that's visible and easy to get to adopt when you're not even taking adoptable dogs there?
Well,
We
and I
don't
do think,
so what my whole point's this, that's a whole nother conversation, in my opinion, that shouldn't hold up this conversation. That's
Agreed.
just my opinion, based on the meeting I had with animal control.
I guess what I'm trying to get a feel for is there a majority of council that's ready to move forward on the 20th, or do you want answers before do we need another approach to this?
A little more discussion.
I personally don't
Well,
think we're rushing because
I
staff's
have-
coming to us with a
I
recommendation.
have an issue that was brought up back during our initial conversation about this, and I would like to see what other counties have, and you guys already have that information, obviously, because you said you had already looked at it, so why can't you give it to us?
Well, I don't wanna mislead and say we've done a, exhaustive search of other properties. We have looked at some other facilities to see, and to be honest, a lot of them are in old, shopping centers, and they've retrofitted things, and they are not gonna be to the standard that we think a coroner's office should operate in. And that is.
How
that
many
is-
counties did you look at?
I don't know. I mean, it's been a while since we looked at it. Again, it wasn't a scientific approach to that.
I mean, I
but-
was just curious. I just
I
wanted
think it's
to,
Horry County, Spartanburg, Lexington,
I think we talked about those,
Greenville.
yes.
I'm missing one. I've got it here, but I'm not gonna flip back and look.
Yeah.
Mhm. So you talked about, you looked at other properties where you looked at possibly retrofitting. So, talk to me about what you found on that. I mean, cost-wise and stuff. And maybe that will help myself to understand what the retrofit costs. Because again, in the past, we've retrofitted high schools. It's cheaper, but it's expensive, and I get it. But is there comparables that you guys can share? I guess,
We had a conversation on that before the meeting, and I think
Mhm.
there are some comparisons.
Yeah,
I think, one of the buildings we looked at was 2400 West Main Street, which is across from
Mhm.
Northwestern High School.
okay,
It's now a child care center.
yeah,
It had some things we could have done there.
Yeah.
But ultimately, I think there was, some power line easements, there were some issues with accessibility to what we had discussed with the Sally Port,
mhm,
and then, getting in and out of that facility. North Park was another option. We talked about the tech park.
Mhm.
The issue there was, had we wanted to do an autopsy suite in the future, it really would not fit in that. We could have put a morgue in there.
Mhm.
We could have put the Sally Port, but we would eventually run out of space. This will allow for the flexibility for future council to, you know, add on to that existing facility. And then the other thing I would say is if we purchase a new facility, there's a site acquisition cost, land component, in addition to the structure itself, which would have to be refitted. We'd have to look at the zoning, accessibility. We did have an agent, commercial agent, look at properties. We went down that for about, 2 to 3 months. We actually, staff went and looked at about 6 or 7 facilities, including a county facility over on Dotson Street, which is an old mental hospital. And we looked at that, and it wasn't really suitable for our purposes. There were old warehouse type buildings. And then in terms of North Park, what we found is that if you look at that building from the outside, it looks pretty modern. But it was built in the 90s, so there are a lot of code issues. Elevator had to be completely rebuilt. All the plumbing and the restrooms are not ADA up to today's standards. And if you're gonna go into a facility, you have to bring all that up to code. Which in this case, if a new construction, you're building things already to code. So, I mean, I don't know that we can say refurbishment versus replacement cost per square foot. I don't know we can give an exact number on that, because it depends. And let's not forget there's IT that's gonna have to go in there and all the other things into an existing
Yeah,
facility.
is the building that we're speaking of though, where they house the animals, how many square feet is that? And would we have to
About
add on to?
18,000.
How many?
It's about 18,000.
It's
The current animal
18,000.
Control facility, yes.
Okay. Okay.
That's
The
also
current
a pretty good
facility's
distance from the
18,000?
Hospital too.
It's a distance from the hospital, and we're still, that's a separate track we're on right now with another architect,
Mhm.
and we're looking at that. And, we're not ready to bring that even back to you all at this point.
Right.
So if we put them on a series track, then it's gonna delay the corner project till we
Uh-huh.
really determine what we're gonna do with animal control.
Right.
Um,
But that's 18,000 and this building's what, 9,000?
9, and if you look at phase 2, it's 13, 14.
4,200 square feet.
Wow.
How much time would it take? To me, what I'm hearing is the only potential options are to go find other land, which just increases the cost. If council's not
'Cause you're gonna
supporting
have to-
7 million,
Land acquisition.
then that's gonna add to the cost.
Mhm.
That's not really feasible. The only potential option that I'm hearing from council that you guys want to be explored is number 1, to answer Debbie's questions on, are we building a facility that's consistent with what the rest of the neighboring counties are? And number 2, can you retrofit a different building at any reduced cost? Is that something that y'all can get an answer to fairly quickly, or is that
I would
gonna
say
take a while?
the one question I would have is, in order to determine if you can retrofit a building for a reduced cost, we have to know what building it is.
Yep.
I think the only one that I've even heard mentioned, the only one that we have available would be the animal shelter.
Yeah, right.
Can y'all determine, how long would that take just to give us to answer the questions for the council that has some questions here?
I believe, and I think engineering would have to answer whether it needs to go back out for a design RFQ to pick a designer to be able to do those services, or whether that's something that they could do under an on-call contract. But we don't currently have a contract, so we can't do any work.
Okay,
'Cause we
that's
don't-
what we would need to approve on.
You would need to approve a design contract in order to do that,
Uh-huh.
to start.
So would approving the design contract on Monday, would that allow you to be able to answer these lingering questions from council before?
Well, I don't think we'll be able to answer what the cost would be to refit the animal control facility without another contract. I think we can look at other counties and what facilities they have, but to be an apples to apples, we'd have to look at, okay, what's your staff, what all functions do you perform in that office? I mean, we could certainly do that. But I'd just be cautioned to say, if they've got a smaller facility, they may have smaller staff and smaller services to make that cost comparison. I mean, we talked extensively about tying offices to current staff, and we're gonna hold that line with, okay, you're not gonna add 20 more offices for what you may get in the future. We would tie that to what their staffing is today. But having said all that, yes, we can go and look at what other counties are doing. and come back. But
I
we would
think-
need an
I think-
additional contract to look at the animal control
I
facility.
think if the consider it, can we do it cheaper? And I guess, you know, we could explore with the contract, are there options to reduce the size of this or to maybe save some money depending on the scope of what we're trying to accomplish? And I would guess the answer to that would be yes, we could look at that. I mean, if we're now talking about putting this behind the animal shelter, then we haven't found any land for the animal shelter yet, so we don't know where that's moving to. We haven't done conceptual, so it really would put the coroner's office years away, which if council's okay with that, we're okay with that. But this is not something you're gonna resolve in a couple of months, because we've got the animal shelter that we don't know what we're building or where we're building or how much that's gonna be yet. In addition, it still doesn't solve the problem that the animal shelter is probably 15 miles away from where it needs to be ideally. So not saying that couldn't work, but that is certainly not ideal. So, you know, I think the option is, we feel like we fully explored buying an existing building and retrofitting that and being able to accomplish what we think the coroner is gonna need. And also keeping in mind that we don't envision getting out of the coroner business anytime. So that building, you know, we think of buildings in terms of a generation of use. Mike mentioned the building on Main Street. That was a temporary solution. So the one on North Park would have been a more permanent solution, but by the time you put all the IT costs and furniture costs and everything in that, I'm not so sure you would have saved much money on this. So again, we can pursue whatever option council would like for us to do, but you know, our position is based on what we understood we were trying to accomplish, this is the best option. But again, happy to reconsider and take a different approach if council would like.
Yeah, I guess my only question would be, and you said that you looked at these other locations. Did you ever get a dollar figure though for retrofitting on any of these places? That would,
A call, we may
The
have.
2400 Main, Rachel, you did
Yeah.
that.
For 236 North Park, we did.
Okay,
Mhm.
236, okay.
what was
North?
the?
Well, I only know from a construction value standpoint, but then you've got probably the same amount of costs, on top of that, what that was at the time, I think. And I don't think that included, a freezer component at the time either. So I actually don't know, going back to like that site, for example, that we could fit a cooler and a freezer.
Or
What was
You didn't
the-
have a freezer, you didn't have a
The
salad
salad port
freezer.
was-
We did not have a
Right.
salad port or.
Yeah,
Because
and
the
what,
site,
do we have a dollar figure though was associated to it?
we do, I don't know that I have that.
We don't have that, but I think, Rachel, you're helping me remember, we have a dollar value, but it was for construction of upfitting North Park, but it did not include a morgue or a freezer space or a sally port, so it would be apples to oranges,
Right.
even if we could remember the number.
Was it-
because That was
oh.
like 2 years ago.
Yeah.
I tell you
Would
the
it-
other thing you have to keep in mind too, again, I'm not here promoting moving forward, I'm just sharing with you what I learned from talking to them, because I want to understand this. We have 2,500 deaths a year. In 2022, we had 2,500 deaths in York County. York County's growing. I've had every census, we're growing like 30,000 people. So the need for a coroner's office is not diminishing, it's only growing as the county continues to grow. And being the second fastest growing county out of 9, we're gonna continue to grow more than likely. So we do need a facility that allows us to continue to expand, to handle the need for what they do.
Well, I certainly don't want to go above 7 million. I think construction costs are going up. I think that management has approved this and the coroner has approved this. And we're saying that these two items of the animal shelter and the coroner's office are separate. I would support us putting it on the agenda for us to talk about it, but I don't feel like we've got a majority of council that is there right now. And y'all just need, if you I need you to correct me if I'm wrong on that, because there's no point putting it on there if we're not gonna support the effort.
So just, talking through this, and this is a good conversation. I think we're in a precarious situation though, just because of the fact that we don't have a location for the dog, to move those people in the property. And the length of time that's gonna take, I think that's a quandrum that I think to me is challenging, because it's gonna end up, if we waited to do this building, it would push that out for a few years. I can see that concern. So, I think that, cost-wise and understanding retrofitting based on this conversation, it sounds like the retrofitting component was fairly pricey. You don't have a dollar figure, but sounds like it was fairly pricey.
It's grown a lot for North Park, just to
Yeah.
bring that up for the sheriff's office.
Yeah.
That project has grown. A lot of the cost growth is just code.
Yeah,
Elevator, roof,
Mhm.
HVAC, all those things have to be
yeah.
replaced.
So having said that, I think if we're gonna move forward with a vote tonight, I think that, at this point, I would like us to, David, you stated this too, let's look at the price and let's see if we can, at least for good purpose, maybe save some money here or on this design or somewhere along the line, at least where we can walk into this knowing that we're getting the best ballpark price on this one here.
Well, and I mean, if we do move forward, there will be design work that's to be done. So, I mean, what has been presented is not by any means a finished product.
Mhm.
And we could certainly come back with that design to you all and describe current staffing,
Mhm.
current, all these types of things. I would suggest that is a possibility should we go forward with this. But if we go forward, it would be on the site. That's the one thing, would be new construction.
Yeah, and there is, in the past where we did retrofit a high school, it was pricey because we had to tear out a lot of old
You got lead
components.
paint, you just don't know how
Yeah,
some of these
it was
buildings are.
extremely pricey. So I guess at this point, I think having talked through this, I think as long as we can be very conscious of the price as we move forward and
Well,
save money
share
as we
that.
go. Yeah,
And the staffing, we want the staffing to
Mhm.
match it. We
Mhm.
obviously want some room for growth, but I think that's a comfort level council has to have in terms of
Mhm.
current staffing, offices, and all that. That's a
yeah.
conversation.
I
we
guess
can have.
to me, I think I would support this tonight as long as we can have that further discussion around the cost of this. Okay, let me just put it that way.
Right, the requirements, I think,
Mm-hmm,
are they matching and then the cost?
right, exactly.
So we could build into the design process some updates with the council
Yes.
about the justification for the 9,000 square foot, maybe that could be smaller. The offices, how many offices versus how many
Mhm.
employees.
Right.
That we would build that into the process, and if there's an opportunity to do a smaller building for less money, that would certainly be an option, correct?
Yeah, and we, in our proposal for design services, we included cost estimates at schematic. I believe we included a presentation to you all at that time as well. Because yes, when we did the scoping meeting, we did change the number of offices as one item at that scoping meeting just a month or so ago.
Well, if we do, because I also think though, I want to save us, I would like to save money, but I don't want to design a building that we're gonna have to update or expand on, and it's gonna cost us more. And I think what Watts was saying in regards to that, the holding or,
The Sally Port.
yeah,
Board.
the morgue component of it. Maybe there's ways where we can incorporate that in and look at the design of it. That way we're covering that future use.
You're talking about the autopsy.
Autopsy room, excuse me. Yeah, and maybe because if we think that's coming, again, just want to make sure we're as efficient as we can here.
Right, and phase two, the autopsy, that would be phase two, and that's not, that would not be part of this
Mm-hmm,
design or construction, but the site would be, it would be designed so that we would have that room for growth, should that be,
If you can get
council choose that.
if you guys can get the answers to Debbie's question, within the next day or two, so that council can have that information before Monday, and
We can do that.
Okay, and then I
Do y'all have any
have
other
a question
specific
about North Park.
Sure.
So on the upfit, so are you saying like, how long ago was that you looked at North Park?
I would say that was 2021, I wanna say, late 21 to early 22.
Yeah.
For a coroner fit, and then we had the conversation with coroner, and we told her, you're not gonna have the ability to have autopsy here, and she said, I don't want my staff split, so that's when we
Okay,
made the
so have
change
you
this
looked
year.
recently at other places?
I would say the last time we looked at another place was probably 6 months ago.
You've looked at a place since we had our strategic planning meeting?
We did, yes, we did have a conversation with the realtor we had at the time who identified 2400 West Main. And there were some vacant sites, but there was really he didn't really have any commercial property that would be, suitable for this. Now, that's been several months ago, so that was post.
I would just be curious, because so many places are going out of business and, with the economy as such.
Madam Chair,
Yeah.
I'd like to caution us on, if the coroner's office feels like 9,000 square feet meets their current needs and their future needs, like in the next year or so, I would caution us to suggest reducing the square footage size when we know York County is growing. That doesn't make sense. I know we're talking about being good fiduciaries of our money,
Right.
taxpayers' money, but if there's a need, there's a need. You can't reduce the need unless we're gonna send.
Well, I think we talked about that we would look at it from a smart perspective where we still meet the need, but we look at it from a cost
Like
perspective.
the phase 2 could be part of that future
Yeah.
growth.
All right, we've spent 45 minutes on this, and does council have any other, I guess what could happen is if council doesn't have their questions answered appropriately, they could defer the item on Monday night's agenda.
So, I make
Between
a
now and then, I
motion.
think it'd be good
We
for,
defer?
well, we don't make
Oh,
the
okay. We
motions
don't have
here.
to do that.
Get the
Okay.
questions
Okay,
that
gotcha.
council's are there any other questions that council wants answered before they can
I'd
ask
like
the
to have the
question?
map that's legible, and I'd like to know how many employees there currently are, and I'd like to know, the number of deaths over the past 4 years and what that increase is over the past 4 years, just to see that, and how many, I guess morgue spaces are needed versus how many are proposed, for this. I'm just trying to figure out how far into the future this takes us. And again, I need to know what all these office spaces are.
Yeah, the one thing I would just note is, again, that's not the most recent plan that we talked about, from our last scoping meeting.
Why would y'all give us a plan that's not current?
Well, that's the latest one that exists. We scoped this in a meeting, but we haven't been under contract to do any further design or development of it. But that is the
That was
feasibility study that was
Okay,
approved.
but that was used for the programming, just to get a general idea of the square footage, to get a budget,
Mhm.
to get the budget to move forward. What we wanna do is, hopefully on Monday, is then get Rachel under contract to start actually drawing and talking about these value engineering ideas, really honing in on the square footage and the size of the rooms, and then we have a
Number of
general
staff.
idea on square footage and a general programming. And that's what we use for budget, but the contract coming up is for design, and that's when it gets into detail. Does that make sense?
My only recommendation is that we engage the coroner's office in this process. So
It
we
sounds like
know-
management's engaged them. Have y'all
Yes,
included them in
keep
this?
engaging them in the process,
They've been
because
involved.
they're telling us what they need, and if we're gonna disagree with what they need, you have to understand the
In
reason
fact,
why.
when we negotiated the scope of fee, they were involved in those meetings.
Yeah,
And-
so I just say, as we proceed, still include them,
Mhm.
so you can say,
Of
the
course we
coroner's
will, yeah.
office is in favor of this because they have 32 staff members, we've got 30 offices built, they're gonna double up, or whatever they're gonna do. Lay it out for us.
All right, let's move on. It sounds like to me that there may very well be a deferral Monday night, but I think we need to move on, to the other items on the agenda. Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you.
Next item, we have follow-up discussion regarding York County Code 151.200, protection of grand trees. As I remember our last workshop, there was a request from council to ask that maybe some proposal come back on the industrial and the school piece of this. We did receive the memo from, do you guys want to present the information that you have to council?
Sure, yeah,
Well,
as I heard the takeaway, at the end of the last workshop, there was this discussion about what our current list of protected trees are they broken down by species? And there was a discussion about whether that current table is sufficient, or if we should move back towards what the measurement was, the DBH diameter of breast height a few years ago and a couple amendments ago, which was 32 inches. So in the memo that I provided before the weekend, you turn to, I think it's the third page here, you've got the short table. So that's our current list of grand trees and their diameter. So that's diameter of breast height, DBH, that essentially is arborists speak for 4.5 feet. That's where you measure the tree, the diameter of it. So that list, originally, several years ago, and since the tree protection ordinance was adopted, it was 32 across the board as a uniform. Didn't matter whether it was a red bud tree, a holly, a pine, an oak, didn't matter, it was all 32 inches. So during part of the open space update in 2021, that was changed to 24 across the board. So that brought us more in line with where the rest of the counties are. And if you turn towards the last 2 pages of the memo, I've got 2 charts in there. And that shows you every single, I went through all of these jurisdictions, went through all their zoning codes. So every single species that's called out specifically, I added to the table here. So you can see how that breakdown of those different species are protected across the various jurisdictions. So the 24 across the board put us in line with how a couple of counties handled that, specifically Charleston and Berkeley. They're just 24 across the board. So fast forward 1 additional year during the code updates. We got some feedback from a couple of cases that went to the zoning board that there is a feeling here locally in York County that pine species aren't as valued species to protect than others. So the thought was, well, instead of having a measurement across the board, why don't we take the approach that Horry County and some others do, where they've got a very specific species list that's more regionally focused, and the diameter changes according to the species. So, excuse me, that's the list that we have now. So that was created jointly with our consultants on that project and with our on-staff expert. We have a landscape architect, we have an open space planner that's an arborist, so they've worked on that list together. And generally, the species on our current list are more regionally focused, so you're not going to look to identify a specific diameter for species that really aren't going to be present. So that's why we have that list currently. And in terms of a recommendation, because we were asked, would we have any specific recommendation on changes for any of those measurements, whether that's to 32 or any other number. And we don't propose that any of these numbers be changed. And I added into my list a couple of reasons for that. One, the numbers changed twice inside of the last 3 years. And if I'm a developer and I'm looking to scope out my project, or I'm a surveyor and I'm looking for trees on the site, the more times that changes in a short period of time, the more difficult my job becomes. And the same is true for a reviewer on the back end of that. We feel like the list is in a good spot. And if you look at where other jurisdictions are measuring that, we're certainly not the most restrictive. Even at 24 for a lot of the species, that's certainly on the higher end of the spectrum in terms of trees that are protected, as opposed to the smaller diameter in some jurisdictions. And I did want to point out that across all of these jurisdictions, no matter what the size is, the tree is protected. They all have different terminology. Heritage tree, protected tree, grand tree, whatever the terminology that they're using is, their codes all allow for a grand tree to be removed through some process. Some processes are more detailed than others, but they're all allowed to be removed by some mechanism. That includes York County. And so with the amendment that you all passed just a couple of months ago, previously the only way to mitigate removal of a grand tree was to plant replacement trees on the site, and you all added in 2 additional options on top of that so that you could have additional tree save above what's required. So an area of the site that's already treed, you just protect it permanently, and you add some area that's equivalent to the grand tree that was removed. And the other provision that was added was the ability to contribute to the York County Tree Fund at a rate that's established in the ordinance. Since that was passed just a couple of months ago, we've had a couple of projects go through, and when they get approved for grand trees to be removed administratively, we are finding that most sites are able to utilize that additional tree save and nothing else. So not replanting any trees back on the site, just permanently protecting existing trees that are already on the site that they are not proposing to remove. So we're having very few projects come in that need to do plantings on top of that, and we have not had anyone make any contributions to the York County Tree Fund to date. So that's what we have, and happy to take any questions.
So, yeah, I've got a couple questions. So during that, first of all, thank you, Jonathan. During that meeting, I had requested that you come back with a proposal to bring us back to 2001 with accommodations if somebody does have trees that are 32 inches. It doesn't, I mean, I don't see any, I mean, you didn't come, you kind of reinstated where you're at as opposed to coming back with a recommendation. I was expecting a recommendation. I don't see anything here. When I'm, hang on, just, I appreciate your time. I'm looking at this thing here, and I'm looking down through the list, and keep me straight here, but do I see Rock Hills 32 inches
Yes, sir.
across the board?
Yes.
Okay. So my recommendation is as I mentioned in the meeting before, I think that we've got businesses out there coming and looking at our recommendations, and a lot of them are deciding not even to go down the road. We've got schools that are paying $200,000 to put in a school, and that's all coming from the taxpayer money to get through this. When it doesn't have to be like that. I think you look at Rock Hill, they got 32 inches across the board. And we're competing against it. We've created what I call a donut hole too. So if we want to be in an area where we want to be both conscious of our environment at the same time, bring businesses in here, because we're going down the Parks Road, we're opening up opportunities for people to enjoy the beautiful scenery and everything. But at the same time, we want businesses to come here. We don't want to scare them off. We don't want to put a burden on our schools when they're trying to put schools in. So as I recommended in looking at this list, I would recommend that we go to Rock Hills 32 across the board. That would be my recommendation. Because I think that we've got an opportunity here to mitigate some of the costs that's been compounded on these commercial opportunities in these schools. That's where I stand on it. I'm going to turn it over to the rest of the group to speak.
All right. Well, this is what I found out, and based on looking at the overall items and the information provided by staff, I'd like to see the following to move forward with this. I'd like to see that pine trees be removed from the grand tree list. There's nothing special about pine trees. Most of them all hybridized breeds for the wood industry anyway, and there wasn't even pine trees here when the United States first originally started. I'd like to see that the dogwoods change from 9 inches to 12. I'd like to see the blackjack oaks, the redbuds, sassafras, and the sourwoods change from 6 to 10s, which, by the way, most of them all grow in the woods under tree canopy. You very rarely ever see them out by themselves. I'd like to see that all other species change from 24 inch to 32 inches. And based on the chart related to the other places, I want to note that a few things which some of these were noted by staff. If we are going to compare, then we need it to be accurately apple to apples. Greenville items were noted by staff, but these are just in the buffer areas. Aikens areas are just on the highway corridors. There's a few things that are just not appropriately correct. Fort Mills policy is apparently 30, not 20 inches. TKK ordinance states that removal of trees from the frontal areas of the lot and not within the lot's interior. Lancaster County has not been enforcing tree preservation. In the city of York, with the grading permit from the state and the city, you can cut any size tree, 6 inches and up. We need to revise the ordinance and to allow industrial, school, and commercial properties that are fully wooded to mitigate 100%, and we should detect the clear cutting of the trees for the tract builders as the school properties, industrial, and commercial sites. We need to be more flexible and transparent. And that's just my opinion, but I think that this is what we need to change for the consistency without leaving an option to the staff.
So,
And it took a lot of information to find this out.
I just want to ask a couple questions. One is the back page, what Mr. Aldred is referring to is Rock Hill, which is a municipality. The numbers on the back of this are mostly municipalities, and we're county. So you're talking about allowing somebody to cut trees for development. Like, I mean, Tommy, it sounds like you're complaining maybe about the city of York allowing all the trees to be cut, but that's what you're saying in essence that we should do also. I just want to be clear on what you're asking for.
Well, I don't want all the trees cut. I'm for more preservation than anything, but I mean, I own 2 sawmills. I burnt wood all my life, and I deal with these species of trees every time. I mean, it's costing people money, especially whenever it comes to our schools and businesses and stuff. I mean, it don't make sense to me.
So you're saying that you feel like a business should be able to come in and clear cut?
No. Well, no. I mean, they can keep back buffers and all, but wherever their site is, I mean, they don't need to have to spend money to, I mean, which school was it we recently had that paid whatever $300,000 just for landscaping? That's taxpayer money. I mean, by no means am I for, you know, I don't want to tract builder one here. Y'all know that. I was perfectly happy with the way our county was previously.
I'm just trying to determine,
But I mean, there's
I think what she's
inconsistencies
saying-
about this.
What she's saying is that the county land it's a little different than the municipalities.
Well, that's
These
right,
are
but
all
I just,
the munis-
these right here that I read
municipalities.
are the counties. In the county in Greenville, they just required that the buffering areas. Aikens, just the highway corners. But York's made a devastation of things. They done annexed in and all that, but only on schools and certain industrial and job sites where they can't come here and they can't put a building if you ain't gonna let them.
I don't know Well, Jonathan, I don't know, I mean, has anybody not come, or has anybody not been able to come to York County because of the tree ordinance?
I have not heard anyone state that to me directly, that we are not pursuing a project.
No, but there's a lot of complaining and costing them a lot of money.
I have heard that communicated through council members and through just one member of the community. I have not heard a specific project reference to me. That doesn't mean it's not happening, I just not have heard that person.
What I heard your suggestion to be would be to apply, to have a standardized objective mitigation
Well, they need to use common
for
sense.
industry and the school properties, commercial, but to still require that to discourage tract development
Right.
on the residential
Right.
piece of it.
Yeah, I think that's a good proposal, Tommy. I think that's, again, I think that addresses a lot of my concerns.
I mean,
At the same, and it helps to support our schools in commercial for their concerns they've had.
Okay,
I
well, the
mean-
schools, so what schools had to pay, how much was it?
Clover, was it Clover? Yeah,
That
300,000.
number includes a lot more than trees. That's not, that number is not accurate.
Well, that is the number we got from them, so I don't know if you have any other update, yeah.
That number includes a lot more than just removal of trees.
But the thing is, even if it's 100,000, it's all taxpayer money, and I think what Tommy proposed is a good compromise, in this situation. I do like what you put out.
I mean, everything on that chart is not accurate. I mean,
I think something that we have to embrace as county council members is that, yes, we are elected to represent the county, the unincorporated areas of the county, which is a little unique for Lake Wiley. But when you look at the footprint of York County, the unincorporated areas, and you look at the rest of the county, its municipalities, it won't be long, there won't be much difference between the municipalities and York County, right? So as the major cities continue to fill up, Fort Mill, there's not much land left to develop. So people are coming into the county to develop the same thing they developed in the cities. So we have to be pretty intentional about what we're thinking about as we just bought a water company. We're starting to push water and sewer into the county, which is gonna generate development at some point. We're gonna be eliminating annexation from the municipalities or annexing our land now. So our footprint at some point won't diminish like it is now. It will stay intact. So we're gonna have the same type of development somewhat in the county as we're gonna have, as we have in the municipalities now, in my opinion. So we need to be thinking about the growth that's coming and what makes sense so that we're getting what we want and preserving whatever we want to preserve.
and there's already a lot of things that you can actually, and I couldn't believe it, actually achieve easier for small business in the cities or the municipalities than you can in the county now.
Yeah.
I was hoping that Watts was gonna finish that sentence with the big difference ultimately in years to come would be that those municipalities don't have the tree canopy and that the county, at some point, decided that it was important to save some tree canopy and that it's.
I'm not against them saving tree canopy, not at all. I mean, I got
Where?
I got plenty.
Where are we gonna
What's
save it?
the majority of it's leaving because of all these tract builders.
Yes.
I mean, that's
You
the
can
whole
save
thing,
them.
but if we need anything, we need businesses in our county. We don't need to be obstructing the small
We've had a
businesses.
couple businesses in Lake Wiley that were more than willing, Tractor Supply is a great example. They were more than willing from the beginning. They didn't have to go back and redo a plan. From the beginning, they made a commitment to save grand trees. They ultimately mitigated a couple of those, but.
But what I'm saying is, a pine tree and a sweet gum tree ain't a grand tree. A red oak's not a grand tree. I mean, I can take you on my place and show you 1,000.
Well, there's no, obviously, we're not gonna have full consensus of council.
And-
I would support your proposed changes because I think it's limited to industrial and to the school
Right.
commercial piece of it, but to
Mhm.
continue to require that. And to go back to a number that's consistent with Rock Hill and Fort Mill. That's only 3 though, and I can't tell from the rest of you. I couldn't tell from your comments. We kind of need to wrap this up to figure out, is there some movement to put this on the next agenda, or are we just done with this discussion? Because I don't think we need to keep having workshops.
I would recommend putting it on the agenda. Absolutely.
Where is the
Yeah.
industrial
I think
piece
we're gonna
coming?
have some public.
I'm sure we will. That's the whole point, is to make sure that we have public comment. I
Yeah.
just think we've got to get it out of workshop. And
Yeah.
maybe there are things that the public will share, and maybe there are
Well-
things that will come to light. We just need to move this ball. We need to get this out of workshop and vet it, and then decide how we move
In
forward.
favor of putting it on the
Yeah, I'm definitely in favor too. And I
We'll
think-
put it on as presented, and then we'll have the public hearing, and we'll allow, everybody can come speak, and then we'll have the full-blown discussion. I think that's the best way to approach that.
This is this.
I didn't get that.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
But
Yeah.
that doesn't
This
need to
is
be the
this.
next meeting, that needs to be a meeting
This,
out.
this is
not
all.
next.
Well, and look, I mean, if y'all can get it on there, as title only, and we move forward, I don't know that we need
The
to,
next meeting is too soon.
Well,
The
why don't
people
we all
know-
get
it wouldn't be public hearing,
Because we
Allison,
might
it wouldn't be
do that
public
at the
hearing
house.
for that.
Well,
We
again-
still
So
would
you
have
say
to
there's
build
not a
in.
public hearing?
No, I'm saying, we still have to build in time, even if you did title only tomorrow, or if we put it on the agenda for next week, we still have 3 readings, and you have to have a public hearing that's advertised, how many days, 15 or 30? We're gonna make sure that everybody who wants to speak on this can speak on it, we just don't need to keep debating it in workshop, and we gotta get it to a
We've been
fashion.
talking about it 2 years. We've passed it, how many times, Jonathan, back and forth? It's like a year and a half we're into this.
It's, the First Amendment to the Grantry, provisions was in,
going on.
2021
Yep.
and again in
I'm trying.
2022.
So for 2 years, we've been talking about it.
All right,
Just so I'm clear, because it sounds like you're asking for an ordinance to appear on the agenda. And we're gonna have to draft that, so you all have something to vote on. And I think what I've got written down is that you're looking for,
why don't, why
One-
don't you give him what you read out?
Yeah.
You had it written down,
okay.
Yeah,
so that we don't need to,
right.
Yeah, I think,
We
I
still got
I would just
another-
say that having it, even for title only for Monday, is a pretty big challenge. I don't know, we haven't drafted an ordinance or
okay.
anything yet.
We don't need to rush it, we just
Yeah.
need to get it to
But
a
I-
place.
Probably 2 weeks from now we could do it.
Sure.
But
We
yeah.
just need to get it out of workshop. We don't
Okay.
need to keep workshopping this.
That's fair.
All right, next item, follow-up discussion regarding York County Code 155.198, use separation. I think council all was sent the memo from you, Mr. Bueno, about some options, 4 different potential options. Has council had an opportunity to review that, or do you want to have a recap?
I've reviewed it.
I'd like for Jonathan to recap.
Okay. So we laid out 4 options. Council had asked for some options and a recommendation from staff as to what might be some appropriate amendments to the language. So I have 4 separate options here, and these are different strategies, and some of these parts are interchangeable. But I do want to point out that the first page of attachment A, where it says existing language, just so as a point of reference, that's what our existing language is. It has that purpose statement, and I do think that if there are any amendments done for the code language, that we would clarify the language under B1A. So when the consultants were crafting the language here, they had a lot of use categories, and as the revisions went forward, the number of uses dwindled down. So that the appropriate terminology for 1A should be vehicle service repair and customization. That phrase includes all of those different uses that are listed there. So that's just a clarification.
So your intention there, instead of using automobile, your intention is just to lump everything that could be moving.
Yes, and that is because vehicle service repair and customization is a defined term in the zoning ordinance, and it includes all of those uses that are listed there.
Thank you for clarifying.
So under the first option there, it would just be to change that separation requirement to be from any other of those uses that are listed. B1A through E, to be specific to the same specific use. So you would have to be a self-storage, it would have to be 660 from another self-storage. A car wash would have to be 660 from another car wash, but it could be adjacent to or closer than that to any of the other uses on the list. So that would be option 1. So that substantially loosens the use separation that's required under the ordinance today, and it may not effectively discourage the concentration of the uses there. So that's the first option. The second option is to utilize that same language change from any other to the same use, but also simultaneously increasing the separation from 660 feet, which is 1/8 of a mile, to 1,000 feet. So you have that separation of the different uses separated out a little bit. That's loosened a little bit, but the distance is increased to have a trade-off there that might limit the concentration of those uses a little bit better. The third option added some language to D2 where it says, unless located on the same lot or an adjacent lot with a cross-access easement, the land uses have to be separated by 660 feet. So that would allow opportunities that are not present in the ordinance today for there to be some synergistic uses if you've got any of these uses that are on the same lot, because you might have a development that has a single lot, but multiple of these uses are located on the same lot. Or if you've got an adjacent lot, and we included language in there that it would have a cross-access easement, so the sites are truly working together. They've got that synergy. You've got shared trips going across the site, not going onto the arterial, and you are potentially reducing curb cuts as well. Because otherwise, if you don't have that cross-access, you've got your separate curb cuts. Everyone's going to come out. You're not having shared parking and shared distribution of trips across the site. So there's not a benefit without that cross-access easement. And then the fourth option is what the staff recommendation is. If there is a change, it's that same language, allowing for these uses to be on the same lot or an adjacent lot with a cross-access easement, but increasing the separation distance to 1,000 feet. So that way you are, to some degree, still achieving the objective of the purpose statement in the ordinance to prevent these uses from concentrating in areas of the overlay, but you are, on the flip side, allowing some of those synergistic opportunities to still occur with adjacency and some of those shared access easements.
Clarification, Jonathan. Currently, in the ordinance, if you have, say, a gas station that has a car wash, all under the same ownership on the same lot, that's allowed.
If they're currently existing, yes.
I mean, if you were to cite a new, say, a new gas station, convenience store with a car wash, that's allowed all on the same property?
It would depend. It would have to be determined to be accessory. So if you've got kind of a standalone, your big car wash, and then there's kind of a big gas station all on the same lot, probably not. But if you've got a service center and it's got a couple of repair bays and they've got one small little drive-through car wash thing, then that probably would be accessory.
So I thought there was an opportunity to do like a development plan where multiple uses could be.
Yeah, and I think I mentioned that to you before, the unified plan for development, and I was mistaken when I referenced that to you before. That deals specifically with buffering properties, so that you buffer the perimeter of a unified development, even if they're on separate lots, rather than buffering each of the individual lots from each other. But
So
it doesn't apply
what is,
to the use separation.
What is very popular now is you would have a convenience store with a drive-through as part of that. Of course, they're gonna have gas pumps. That would or would not be allowed currently.
The convenience store, so the
drive-through restaurant, say at a Wendy's,
Yeah.
and the gas pumps all on the same lot?
Yeah, that would not be.
Okay. And the same thing with what's very popular now is these big car washes, self-serve, that also have a gas station built with it. That would not be allowed as well.
Most certainly.
Okay.
I had someone ask me this question, and I just want to make sure that I was clear on this. In addition to creating the 660 separation, which applies to every different use, does this result in a non-conforming use? How does that work? So let's say somebody who has an existing car wash who wants to, it's dilapidated, and they want to make it nicer. Can they do that even if they have an existing one? And if they can, are they allowed to change the footprint? Tell me what you mean by non-conforming use. I asked you that.
Yeah, so the non-conforming situation and the language as it's currently written does create a non-conforming condition for all of the sites that are inside of 660 feet from any of the other uses that are on the list. So there are a lot of non-conforming uses out there now. And so what that means is you can't increase the non-conformity. So the non-conformity in this instance is the degree of separation. So if you are remodeling and you are adding an addition to your existing gas station, existing car wash, whatever it might be, if the location of the addition is further reducing that separation, say you're at 500 feet and the addition is gonna bring you down to 480, then you can't do that. But if you build it on your other side where you have sufficient separation, you could. But generally speaking, you would probably have to stay within the existing footprint if you were looking to remodel. But I'll also add that, if council's interested in eliminating that non-conforming situation, the existing language could be modified to state that newly proposed uses of these that match this category need to be separated by 660 feet, 1,000, whatever the number might be, from any of the existing uses. So that way, that eliminates the non-conforming status of any of these existing uses.
So, go ahead, Watts. You put your hand up. I got to think about this before I say it.
So, Jonathan, how many new rooftops do you think we'll see in this area that's in discussion tonight in 3 years? What would you anticipate, just roughly?
Several thousand.
Okay. And then how many would you anticipate in 5 years?
Entitlements will dry up on the Allison Creek planned development, so probably not a whole lot more after that.
So 10 years, you don't see a significant difference?
Yeah, my answer gets a little less accurate every year. Yeah.
It depends on what takes place with ordinances and zoning and things like that.
Yep.
So, what I've learned from really digging into this is that as this area does develop and you gain more rooftops, it appears that proper development takes an area like this and they create synergies. So you mentioned gas stations, so it would be common to have, especially on the Four Corner, you would have a gas station, probably with a car wash, maybe with a restaurant. And then adjacent to that, you might have another one. So what you find is, it might be all four corners have a gas station that accommodate the needs of the people in the area, to prevent those people in that area from driving to another area that may already be overly congested. So you're serving the needs of the people in that area. Then, when you think about other gas stations that might come into play in the next mile, it's less likely that you're gonna see the types of gas stations we went to as kids, this little convenience store that doesn't have everything else, because people are going up, as I think I've heard you say, you're going to where the gas is cheaper. So you're probably gonna go up to the Four Corner intersection and get your fuel, instead of going to this smaller mom and pop, which may not even exist. So it seems to me that as an area expands, you've got to allow some infrastructure into the area to reduce curb cuts, to pull as much traffic off of the main corridor and put it on internal road structure that's driving traffic on the backside or within the development area, and not so much on the main structure. So, I guess for the first topic, I personally think it makes sense to consider, and I know some of you have proposals written out, and I look forward to hearing what you have to share. But it seems to me that a gas station with a car wash, obviously a fuel station and a restaurant, probably shouldn't be limited at all. And I'm not sure that restaurants should be limited to where they are either. I have to think about that one. I want to hear what everybody else has to say first, and then we can get into some of the other uses that were included in the 660. And I gotta tell you this, as I thought through this, I've struggled on whether, if you said, just if this helps you as you're thinking through what you want to share, I've struggled with, I tell you what I'm not struggling with. I'm not struggling with the separation of uses. Like one use eliminates another use, I'm not struggling with that, because I for one, don't see that makes a lot of sense unless you want to control, reduce, or eliminate development in an area. Then it does make sense. What I'm struggling with on the distance piece is, you might say, so here we have a storage facility. How far should another storage facility be? Should it be 660 feet? Should it be 1,000 feet? Assuming that we're going to restrict, or we're going to suggest restricting where a storage facility would be. Because you're talking about, if it's 660, then you're going to have roughly 9 in a mile, potentially, if the area and the demand calls for it. Because people just don't build things to build them. They build them because they think they're going to fill up, right? Because there's a need for it. Or do you do it every 1,000 feet, and you have basically 5.5. So I'm struggling with the 660 versus 1,000, because you do have that in your options here you've laid out for us. Anyway, I'm gonna hush. I got more to share, but I'm interested in what you all have to say, because I'd like to learn from you.
So, a couple of questions, I guess. So, what was the goal of actually even doing this? Was it curb cuts? Was it not having people have to take a turn every, whatever number of feet down the road? Because from, when I look at it from a commercial standpoint, there's a lot of work put into where businesses are located, and it's based on demographics and what's going to be well supported in that area. When you have a location where it's accessible by residents, it serves them, and it allows them to get service and not have to drive across town to get to the service they want. The other component of that is by the studies and the marketing studies that companies do. They identify in advance, well, you know what, if I got 2 gas stations here, there's a value of having 2 gas stations here, because it's even going to draw more traffic to there, and it's also going to create competition on pricing. Okay? So there's a value from a marketing standpoint and a value for a cost standpoint to the public, on top of not having them drive across town to get something. They could have saved 5-mile drive and just gone right there and done it. So I really struggle with this whole concept of it, because from a commercial standpoint, that marketing component should be driving it. And for us, to me, this whole thing, it's just blowing the market concept right out of the water, where businesses are looking to move to an area that really makes sense for the public. Because they're not going to put a McDonald's in the middle of nowhere. They're going to put it in a place that makes sense. So I think we are trying to control the outcome of what's going to benefit the public in the service that they're going to bring. I think the market will drive what's good to go there. If it's curb cuts, if that's what we're after, where they go a certain distance. I don't know. I mean, from a marketing standpoint, this whole thing doesn't make any sense to me. So anyway.
So you asked what the purpose of it was.
No.
So the purpose of it is, first of all, you've mentioned a couple things. One was to drive across town. We're not a town. And you mentioned 5 miles. There's not 5 miles. We're talking about 5 miles total between the bridge and Publix and to 5 Points. That's 5 miles. So the whole area is 5 miles. So when you talk about somebody being inconvenienced because they might have to drive to something, they're only going a mile anywhere. We're a little bottleneck, and what has happened to us is that, every auto parts and oil change place that you can name has come within a 1.5 mile stretch. And so the people of Lake Wylie, not necessarily the people in this room that oppose me in most cases, but the majority of people that I represent in Lake Wylie, and the people in Clover who don't want more of it coming their way down Highway 55, and the people who don't want it coming further up Highway 274, are, we don't have but a little bit of area that we can have other places. And people are very excited because one of those places that used to be a gas station is going to be a restaurant. A local person is opening a pizza place there. That's great. Everybody's very excited about that. But the alternative to that would have been another storage unit, another oil change place, or another car wash. And that's not what the people want to see. So, at some point, I need you to allow me to listen to the people in my district. Not these people, again, like I said. Because they oppose, it doesn't matter what it is, they oppose it. But there are, 41,000 people that I represent, and the majority of those people don't want to see more of these uses. Now, I can have them reach out to you individually, I can have them email you, I can have them come to a meeting and explain to you, I can have you come and meet with some of them and hear from them. But I've been listening to them for almost 7 years. I live there. I live exactly halfway between the Buster Boyd Bridge and Publix. And the number of gas stations and storage units and oil change places that I pass going in either direction is ridiculous. So what we would like to do is save some of those little parcels. Just save some of those little parcels for other opportunities, like what's coming into Pit Stop Grill. Y'all like what's coming into Pit Stop Grill, the pizza place, right? So why not let us have more of those things? This is not about placement. And when I speak, I'm not speaking for myself. I'm speaking from the people's point of view, and I happen to agree, okay? And that is that it's not about placement and where we put the next car wash or where we put the next oil change place. It's about we've got enough of those uses. What we want, and Jonathan can do a map for us. I've done a map, and I've already shown it to you once. But he can do a map, trust him more, then say, these are the parcels. Another parcel has sold, and I don't think the guy's going to do what he ultimately wanted to do, but he was going to put a little business there with a restaurant on top. That's great. That's what we want to see. We don't want to see another Jiffy Lube or another anything auto parts. We don't want to see more storage units. We got a developer right now suing the county because he wants to put storage units on land that is $335,000 an acre currently. Right? Take those storage units out a little further and put it on land that's worth $50,000 an acre. That would make a whole lot more sense. And the rest of us don't have to look at it all the time. And it saves that space that's on a prime corner. You pass it on your way home tonight.
hang on a minute, Allison. I'm gonna ask folks that this is council discussion. I know that there's some strong feelings in the room, but I want to ask you to please keep your comments to yourself so we can hear the.
So what we want to have in the end, which I don't know when the end is, but it might be 5 years from now, might be 10 years from now. I don't know how fast things are going to develop in Lake Wylie. But we have emptied that pipeline with the exception of the Daimler, those developer agreements. So what we would like to have in the end is a variety of uses, not more of the same old things. You can ask the people along Highway 274, do you want another car wash? Do you want us to shorten your drive to one of the multiple car washes over on 49? Do you want us to shorten your drive by a mile and put a car wash here? That answer is going to be no. We don't. They're willing to drive. Just like, we don't want a Target, and we don't want a Costco. We're willing to drive for those things. We've only got so much area in Lake Wylie. We are 2 crossroads, and the majority of those properties are zoned residential. So from the bridge to Publix, and from Publix to 5 Points, which is ultimately gonna be the centerpiece of Lake Wylie, we want good stuff. We want things that families can go to, that, I mean, you talk about walkable, and people have said, oh, we wanna make a walkable, the person proposing a car wash wants to talk about a walkable community. I'm sorry, nobody's gonna walk to a car wash. But you know what? They're gonna walk to a restaurant, they're gonna walk to a shop, and we are a little ways out from attracting those places. Part of the reason is because there are not places in Lake Wylie for these businesses to move into. There are not existing buildings. That's why Pit Stop Grill is a great spot for Jerry Simonetti to put his pizza place there, because it's an existing building. But there are no other existing buildings. And the people who can afford to come in and build an existing building are these same people that can afford to do a study and say, these same national companies that come in and say, oh, you know what, this is a great market. They're all packed in here, there's a whole bunch of people here. And let's put another national chain right here. You know, and I mean, I've been talking to a couple different developers about building some, Rockhill developers, about coming and building some spaces, because we need things that local people can move into. Not more car washes, not more storage units, not more oil change places. It's just not what the people want. And I'm asking you to allow me to represent the people that I have dedicated my whole darn life to for the last 7 years. I mean, let me hear from them and let you hear from me on what they want. And if you need to hear from them directly, we can make that happen. But it's quality of life for us in Lake Wylie. And over the past, you know what, the reason I ran is because quality of life was diminishing. And the reason it was diminishing was because past councils approved every rezoning that ever came up. Because really and truly, they didn't really care about Lake Wylie. Lake Wylie was like far out. We were kind of out in the country at that point. You know, and y'all be careful because you got stuff that's kind of far out. But you're close enough to a municipality that you have to care about it. Lake Wylie's not. And so former councils didn't really care about Lake Wylie. If a developer came knocking, county council said, yeah, we'll let you put 600 houses there. We'll do a developer's agreement. We'll require 3,700 homes right here, right out here on 274, because they didn't care about Lake Wylie. And we've gone through stages of people caring and people not caring, and it's time that we care. We're not a municipality that county council can neglect and ignore. We are, you know, very close to Charlotte. We're at the corner of Gaston County and Mecklenburg County, and we're a bottleneck. And we sit in traffic a lot. It'd be great if we had some little places we could pull into and have a drink or have an appetizer on the way home, but we don't have any of those places. And I think that's what we need to create. And you know what, I love to see golf carts going around up and down. They are up and down the sidewalk, and they're out in the road probably when they shouldn't be. But that's what we want to create there. Not places that, the same old places. You know, I remember when I used to go to Las Vegas a lot for shows. And Las Vegas was so cool, you know, but when you got off that strip, it was the same old Home Depot and Lowe's and Walmart's. I'm like, oh my gosh, it's like everywhere else. And it's always stuck in my mind. I don't want Lake Wylie to be like everywhere else. And that's what we're going to be, that's what we'll become if you allow it. That is what we will become.
Well, I wrote down something I proposed, but I was thinking about the separational use requirements applying to be used along the commercial corridor if they are auto change established car washes and gasoline sales, fast food and drive-through and self-storage. The same use cannot be next to each other unless they are immediately accessed by networks to reduce the curb cut, basically like service road. And In addition, if they are on the same lot or adjacent, and there is a cross-access easement, they, could coexist. Uses are the same, must have a separation, and use the 660-foot rule along the commercial corridor if they are single-standing established businesses. But what troubles me most about this is the individuals in between those spaces, though, which you'd have to ask me, Allison, I don't know. Do private individuals own that land? So, and it's kind of a hard case deal because 49, before any of that existed, was one of the most major traveled roads back and forth to Charlotte.
Still is.
Yep, still is. And basically, the body of water, Lake Wiley, is there, and that attracted all these people. But how many of them are homeowner association communities?
Most of them.
And
How many developments?
well, I'm just trying to make an adjustment to why you're getting so much storage stuff, is these people ain't got nowhere to store their stuff.
Same reason I got 4 right next to each other.
But when they make a homeowner
I don't have an
association,
overlay. I sure wish I had one, because I would not have 4 storage areas right next to each other with 2 feet in between them.
right. But when they form these homeowner associations, and then the people ain't got nowhere to put their stuff.
Well, that's just a fact of life. I mean, it's gonna happen.
There's not a shortage. Like I was trying to say, this is not about where we need to place things. This is about the fact that we don't want more of these particular things. We are oversaturated with these uses. This is not something that I came up with. The people weighed in at public meetings. The county hired a consultant to look at this and figure out what can we do about these uses. And listen, I'm telling you, Jonathan's quick to tell me no. So if this had not been something that made sense, he would have said, "Austin, this doesn't make sense." He doesn't agree with me on everything. And so this is not something.
But I mean, have y'all went to the people that own those tracts of land and?
There are very few tracts of land that are even for sale. There are very few. But you know what? And like I said, the issue is that there's not something on those tracts of land that somebody can just move into. There's a developer that's coming. He's coming, and he's going to probably buy some of those parcels and build something that individuals, not corporate America places, can move into and have a business. That's very important to the people of Lake Wiley.
Any other questions or comments from council?
So, this, and I know you're challenged with high density. I get it. I have to drive, you've got a lot of developments that have gone in there and stuff, and we've looked at high density, and there's been changes we've done with high density, in the last year or two. But the problem is that when you've got landowners that are currently there, that they held back on putting residential high density in there because they probably saw guess what, we probably have too much density in here.
No, these are commercial. These are commercial properties. They're not residential properties.
So they're all commercial?
Yes.
Okay. So, again, when you've got so many people concentrated in a certain area, again, I personally have seen myself where meeting with or seeing like overlays, especially when I was on the school district where they wanted to put in commercial use around things, and it was specifically targeted around the needs for the area. I have a real hard problem swallowing the fact that we are going to hold back what the marketing says for a certain property when this is not residential growth, this is commercial, so there's commercial revenue coming in. It's serving those people that are living there, which is a value to them. And I think that if you've got too many gas stations, then they'll say, okay, we got too many, let's put in more restaurants.
Actually, what happens, Tom, is they come in and they put out the national chains come in. Now we have notes and we work through our comp plan. I've spent a lot of time on that comp plan, and it's very important that people recognize the different areas. I mean, I'm not gonna question your comprehensive plan, but here's what happens. Those national chains come in and they put out of business the local businesses. So Michael Johnson said something one time, and I think I told y'all this, was that, you know what, Fort Mill got great stuff. A lot of local owners, small businesses that are owned by local people, and I won't use the word he used, but Lake Wiley got one. And he's right. We've gotten junk, we've gotten crap, and the same old stuff over and over. So when a place comes in and they open up and there's a local owner who we would like to attract to the area, then you got a national chain that puts that person out of business. We've got a little automotive shop right now, struggling to do business. We had another local one that wanted to come in, and after I think it was either 3 or 4, got approved within 60 days of each other. He's like, well, I can't even compete with them. And this is a local guy. So you put the little local places out of business when you let the big chain stores come in and do their studies and go, hey, we need to be here, you know, and those little local businesses, we end up being a little corporate America strip, and that is not what we want. We want to have a little local flavor.
Yeah, I guess I'm seeing these as storage units. I mean, not like large grocery stores. You know, I mean, I'm looking at car washes, you know, retail shops. I guess I don't think of those as a national chain. I think of more something individually owned and somebody
the national
managed.
chains that we get. What you look at in your district are individually owned, except for the big storage unit over there at Zoll Road, and we just got one of those. These are national
You gotta
chains
think.
that we're talking about.
Well,
Does anybody else have anything to add?
well, are they packed?
What do you mean packed?
Well, the oil change
They
and
don't appear to be
all
real
that.
busy. No, they don't appear to be real busy.
Well, if they ain't, they gonna go out of business. Now, I ain't being funny or nothing, but I've always thought that, and believe me, we deal with the health department, and the deciding factor in any business, whether it makes or breaks, is the customers. You get what I'm saying?
Yeah, but we're trying to be ahead of that. We're trying to be ahead of the fact.
And that's
that-
fine if you could talk to people that own the land into it without taking their right away. But I mean, it's your district. I wouldn't want mine, which I wouldn't live in. And y'all can put this on record. Tommy Atkins would not live in Lake Wiley nor Fort Mill, any of them
Fort
places.
Mill.
I'm just as happy as I can be out in the middle of the country.
Exactly.
Let's, I think the purpose of, and I don't know if there's anybody else that wants to comment or have a question, but this will now be the second workshop on this. What I remember us talking about at the last workshop is there never was any discussion or any majority that wanted to consider repeal of the existing thing. I think there's certainly an understanding that we're trying to discourage an abuse of existing uses and not have 45, oil change units right next to each other. I think the question was, is there a way, but I think when government does come in and they take away a property owner's rights, in my head, what I imagine is, I buy a lot that's in a residential area. Says I can build me a house, any size house I want. Everybody moves around me and then decides they don't want a house, or they want my house to be a certain size, or they want it to be a park. Those folks certainly can play a role, but the property owner needs to be at the table and be included in the discussion. And I do think that we need to be real careful about those. I think there are some ways that I think that council could tweak this that would make it even better, because I think what we've now got is we've got a whole list of, I just realized this, that we have a whole list of non-conforming uses out there that now these people are not going to be able to make it look nice, and it's going to quickly deteriorate, and that they don't have an incentive to want to, and I'm not even sure they understand that
The
that's.
stuff is new. I mean, if y'all want to take a tour, I'm happy to give you a tour, because
I
the
don't.
things that you're saying.
I don't want to get into the
make a lot of
combattle with
sense
you.
what
It
you're
doesn't. Because I'm saying that it sounds to me like if we're going to have an additional car wash, if there is room, and I've asked the question, is there? I haven't gotten the answer to that one yet. Some questions about, is there an allowance for a car wash? should that car wash be better suited at the corner next to the gas station versus right behind the neighborhood? Is there a way to tweak that? And I don't know, I mean, I need to hear from council. Is there a solution here? Because I don't hear anybody suggesting we repeal this or that we in any way say don't do that. I think.
So I would like the opportunity to meet with Jonathan, because one of the things that one of the options is interesting, and I'd like to talk a little bit more about that with him, and look at the map with that option. I'd like to sit down with Jonathan or Diane and look at the map and see if one of these options, and I don't remember which one it is right off, makes more sense and actually would actually protect more area. And I think a lot of this got started because, you know, somebody went and said, hey, we're gonna put a car wash right here in place of this historic home, went kind of door to door and said we're gonna put a car wash and replace this home, and everybody would agree, yeah, we don't want to replace that home, so let's put the car wash here. But the majority of people would say we don't want the car wash, and so it's kind of two different conversations. So I would like the opportunity to meet with Jonathan or Diane, since Jonathan's going to be out, and discuss a little bit more about how one of these in particular might help us more, might be a better fit.
All due respect to all the conversations taking place tonight, this is what I think has taken place. Now, I wasn't on council when you all voted on this, and I'll say, I've gone back and I've requested from staff. I wanted to hear the video, I want to see the minutes from workshops, from committees to council meetings, and there's none available, where the other side, the side that's reaching out to you all, saying they didn't know anything about the 660 separation of uses. Are y'all getting emails and phone calls and text messages and whatever else? Well, I am as well. And unfortunately, that group is saying they knew nothing about the 660. Even council members have texted and said, I had no idea that was in there. So, what I'm getting at is, I get your passion for what you want in Lake Wylie. And this is a tricky position for all of us to be in, because we're not the same boat she's in, right? We're not the same boat that Allison's in Lake Wylie. But we do have a bit of a responsibility as council members to think about an issue and not be partial towards any one view or another, but try to look at this through a clear lens and see if there's something that could be better for the landowners. You mentioned the landowners, taking uses away from landowners, and from what I've heard directly from landowners that own the land, they feel like the uses have been taken away. You got families that are in their 70s and 80s that held on the property, and this was their retirement, and now they can't do with it what they want to do with it.
You've heard that from people in Lake Wylie?
Yes, I have.
Let's talk about that after.
So for us as council members, it would behoove us to try to understand this conversation thoroughly and vet it out and think about what takes your feelings into consideration, and if it's half and half, what one half thinks they'd like to have for Lake Wylie and what the other half might want to have. And I think what we ultimately come up with is a solution that's different than our normal ordinances that other areas of the county go by. This would still be a special ordinance, right? Wrong?
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Yeah.
This would still be a special ordinance. This would be an ordinance that takes into consideration some of the things that you're looking to accomplish, but it's also taken into consideration the viewpoints of the side that, in my opinion, and I'm saying this is an opinion because I have been given no proof from the county, and I've requested it, and there's nothing available where the other side had a voice in this conversation.
You know, I think one of the hardest things to do in this day and time is get the word out to people. And there are also people in the county that don't know that we've basically eliminated apartments and townhomes.
Right.
So when you talk about people not knowing, there's tons of people that don't know. I mean, how do we get that
With
word out?
all due respect, you do a good job getting the word out, but everybody needs to get
That's
the
what I'm
word
talking
out.
about.
Yeah, how
That's
to
a
get
very
that
difficult
word
thing to
out.
do.
I would love to know.
We could bring
Well,
up.
you both do a good job getting the word out. But
That's
We could
because
bring
we
up
work
20 things.
24/7
Specifics of
on
that.
our district. We work 24/7. Listening to the people, working with the
when you
people.
get the
We
word
listen
out
to
there-
the people of our district.
When you
That
get
is
the
what
word out,
this
you
is
have to
all
listen
about.
to both
When I was
sides.
elected,
listen.
I was elected by the people of District 7. I'm very proud of that fact, and I want to represent them to the best of my ability. And I work honestly night and day on
I
that
believe
once.
it. I believe it. And I just say, if you're getting the opinion from all sides, you're doing your job really well, and I appreciate that.
So what we
No,
do is
I don't hear that
we need
a
to get the
lot.
word to you, not to us, but we need to get the word to you from everybody.
With this particular issue, we are hearing, you may not be hearing from the other side, we're hearing from the other side.
We're
So
copied on
I'm
those
saying,
emails.
for
I
me
get
to-
the same emails you
For me
get.
to validate that, they had a voice in this process previously, I asked for documentation.
Maybe those people don't even live here anymore.
And there's no documentation. So,
I mean,
that's
people
why I say as a
move, you
council
know.
member, I've got to look at this.
How many pieces
at
of
both
land are
sides
we
and both
talking about?
views, and come up with a suggestion that makes sense.
I'm really curious, how many pieces of land, do you know how many pieces of land you're talking about?
I actually been over in the area, I've put my eyes on it all, I've ridden around, I'm fairly familiar. We don't
Well,
have to
no,
get
I'm
into
asking
that.
how many.
We don't have to get into that tonight. We have to make a decision on separation.
That's what I'd like to work with Jonathan on, to be able to come back and show what are the parcels. And I'll sit down with you and let's go through the emails that you've gotten from people. I think that's an important thing.
Yeah.
And I'll say this, I wrote this down, and this may prolong this further.
No,
Right.
it's not.
Well,
You probably shouldn't
how do
say
you
it.
create? Well, I don't mind saying it.
Okay, let's
Because you know
say it.
what? I
Okay.
represent York County.
Okay.
I was elected to represent the 6th district, but I represent your district, yours,
forbid.
and yours, and
Okay.
Vaughn's. So,
Mhm.
I'm not biased in this. I'm trying to make an educated decision with every decision I make on council.
Okay.
So I wrote this down, and yes, somebody might say, why in the hell did you say that? Well, I'm saying it because I believe it. She said, I wrote down, how do you create what you're looking to create? Is it possible? I think about Mount Pleasant. I'm just talking out loud here. I'm thinking about Mount Pleasant. I'm thinking about Sullivan's Island. I'm thinking about places you go and visit
Weddington,
that, pardon me?
Weddington.
Okay, I'm thinking about places you go and visit that have accomplished it. How did they do it? I know I'm opening up Pandora's box here. I'm just simply saying, but when I think about this, I'm trying to think about this holistically. I'm not here to make recommendations that Allison is not gonna be in favor of, or that the other side's not. I'm trying to think through this and make a solid recommendation that makes sense. And we're gonna make a recommendation when we do, that's not what we're doing in the rest of the county. So we're making an exception.
Right, so I think the challenge with this, if Lake Wylie was a municipality, you would approach it from that perspective, and you could have your own game plan internally, and it would be good. The challenge is that it's part of York County, right? You're not a municipality, so we as board members have to be on board with and be able to absorb something like this and come with common, something that we can all agree upon across the board.
How do I help you understand? How do I, because I can tell from things that are said that sometimes you don't understand what we're dealing with. So how do I?
Well, I
I'm
drive
willing to
through
put
your
all the
area a
time
lot, so I
in.
know what the traffic's like, so if
It's
that's
not
one
about traffic.
component.
It's not about traffic. How do I help you understand what the need is in Lake Wylie and what the people want? That's the question. How do I help y'all understand what?
Well, I think we're getting a lot of feedback in general. I think a lot of people are speaking up. I mean, I hear from people, a lot of people speak up. And I think we're, so we have that hearing,
So you want
we
feedback
get.
from people? Is that?
Yeah, I mean, I think
good?
that's important. That's what it's.
Well, you just mentioned traffic.
But again, I think, hang on one second. This is something, again, that is outside of, because I again, back to my whole thing, there's a commercial, marketing, all that goes into factor where large groups of people are. So there's value in what they bring in. And if it doesn't work, that business goes away and something else comes in there. The market will drive what commercially will make sense. That's where my beliefs are on this
So you
matter.
don't believe that we should plan, like you just, so I just wanna be clear, because I wanna be clear, because I'm gonna share this conversation with everybody.
Yeah.
And because I want them to reach out to you, I want you to hear from the people.
Sure.
And that's very important, and so, I feel like when we represent an area, I mean, we have another small area plan in the county, I didn't agree with it at all, but I voted for it. I voted for it on behalf of that council person. And I to this day, I don't agree with it, but 100% I'm behind it. Because when we did this originally, 100%, everybody was behind the small area plans that people created. And every council member at the time had the opportunity to do a small area plan based on what they felt was necessary. You know what? If I'm not elected, the next person can come along and say, you know what, we want to change this. But until such time, I represent the people to y'all. That's why everybody doesn't have to show up and speak to you individually, because we all represent our areas. And yes, we do represent all of York County. And when we're talking about something that's county-wide, we should all weigh in on that. But when we're talking about something that's specific to a district, we should listen to that person. That's what I said earlier. If you don't trust me, if you want to hear from the people in my district,
No, it's not that we don't trust you, we trust you. It's not, the fact is that we as a council all, because we all have to cast a vote on this, right? So we all have to be comfortable with what's compounded.
That's what I'm asking, how do I make you comfortable?
Well, I think that basically on the conversation we had in what I deem as what is commercially in marketing and where that all ties together, because I think businesses drive opportunity or people drive opportunity with business. And I think if something goes in there and it doesn't work, it's gonna fail and something else good will go in and that will make sense. So I personally have to get to a point where I have a comfortable view of what's going on. And I currently don't have that now, okay? I'm just being open with you on this thing, because I know we need to talk through this, right? So I guess more discussion, let's bring this up. I mean, probably we can get it on agenda, get people in there. We can look at some options, and maybe we can find somewhere where we would feel comfortable with a certain version of this. Again, speaking out loud, because we all have to vote, you know? And this is
You already did vote on it.
Well, again, there's stuff in here that I guess maybe that we did not.
That's a problem too in itself.
Anyways.
I have a
I don't
question.
think we wanna go there.
Yeah.
I have a question for staff. Per rooftop, how many vehicles do you typically equate to per rooftop if you're planning out an area? 2, 3?
I don't, let,
Yeah, let's get it.
we've been going at this.
Cars a day per household?
I'm gonna ask you your opinion, and then
So
we're not
here's-
going,
so here's why I'm
I'm not interested
asking
in
this
workshopping
question
this
very
anymore.
quickly.
Yeah, let's just bring it.
Here's why I'm asking this question. This just is again, how I'm having to think of this as a council member. You said earlier, in 3 years, there could be roughly 2,000 rooftops, making 10 trips a day. Well, maybe it's 3,000, maybe it's 15, okay, whatever it is, it's still higher than where it is now. Here's the point. I know we're thinking about this tax district, but where are those people gonna go if they don't have the infrastructure to support their needs? Where are they gonna go? Where do you think they're gonna go?
They don't have the land to support the infrastructure.
They're gonna go to Highway 49 is where they're gonna go. Now,
The
the people
Highway
that live.
49's
Or they're gonna
people
push them
that
into
live
other
and drive-
districts.
Pardon me?
Or they're gonna push it into District 3. I mean,
They-
I really
they
don't.
could, But the people up on 49 aren't gonna be too pleased that 10 trips a day are gonna be added to the traffic flow already there. My point's this, when you're looking at this holistically, it's not just about this area, it's about the areas that are affected by not having some type of growth that takes care of the needs of those people and keep them in their area versus going to another area that you already said is heavily congested. So, you know, and we say listen to the people. Well, the people may not know what I just told you, but you know this as council members, and you know a lot more than probably the people know about the specifics on why you're making a decision. Because if we move ahead and we allow separation of uses completely, and you're moving all the traffic from this area, whenever the rooftops come, if the school gets in place, the rooftops are gonna come probably, and they're gonna hit 49, they're gonna be pretty upset up on 49 that you pushed all that traffic up there, and you didn't create some kind of infrastructure to take care of the needs of the people that are in that area. Whether
I
it's
think-
gas station,
I get it,
whether
Watts.
it's restaurants.
We've been at this
It's
for 2
a-
hours,
but
and
we're
here's what I'm
here-
trying to do.
but
I'm
we're
trying to
here-
figure out what, I can't tell, we can't fix this issue, and I will tell you, I have no interest, I have zero interest in workshopping this again. I would ask other council, is any other
So how
council
do we wanna
wanting to
proceed?
workshop?
No, I think we get this on the agenda.
I think
and we
management's made, or
knock
if we're
it out.
gonna continue to discuss it,
So
then I
you
think
want
there
the
needs to be an
recommendation
issue
for
that
staff?
staff needs to make a recommendation that there's a way to tweak this to address the issues. I don't have a problem with Ms. Love meeting with Jonathan on, well, I don't know which provision you were talking about,
I'd
1 or
like to
4?
meet with Jonathan and Watts and Tom, so I'd like to meet with them.
Well, we're going,
Let's just have one meeting if we're gonna do that.
Yeah.
I don't mind.
Just point out Jonathan.
what's management's recommendation on
Yeah,
that?
yeah, let's, hold on one second.
Number 4, management's recommendation was number 4.
So we,
But I think there are parts of one and a few of these that you want to incorporate in a recommendation.
I do too.
mhm.
Okay.
Well, that's
Yeah.
basically what I was
That's what
saying.
he
Yeah,
put.
so what
It's a
Tommy-
combination of 1 and 4.
Yeah, what Tommy put together, I think this should be part of.
Not
the-
just by myself, believe me.
Listen, I'm gonna say this, I'm asking to meet with the two of them and talk about it, and if Jonathan doesn't have to be there, cause I got his notes, but I don't want you to just dismiss this because you're tired of talking about it.
No, I'm not
It-
dismissing
it
it. I'm
needs
trying to
more-
move the ball forward
it
because I'm
needs-
hearing him say he supports a 1 and 4, you support a 1 and 4, but we're talking around issues, so I don't know.
Well, I mean, look, I wanna go home as bad as anybody else does, and I don't mind speaking about specifics. I've got all mine, I wrote them down, I've been studying.
Can we hear
this
the,
for-
can we hear the specific proposal that you're talking about?
It's somewhat like Tommy's. I started out with gas stations as an example. I said, I do believe that a gas station should allow a car wash and a restaurant with a drive-through synergy in a space. I believe that adjacency property is important. So you take a 4-corner intersection, if you got a gas station here, adjacency means it crosses across the street. Learned a lot in this process I didn't know before. And that means you could have another car wash and gas station and restaurant on the other corner, and the other corner, the other corner, if that's what makes sense. The developer comes, or somebody comes in, they want to put that there, so I think that should take place. And then, I'm okay personally with saying no limitations on gas stations. So if somebody thinks they wanna put one 600 feet down the road, but I just don't see that happening, because people are gonna be driven to where the gas is the cheapest. These smaller gas stations that don't offer the same thing as, I won't even name names, they're not in business anymore. In Rock Hill, they're closing. Then restaurants, as an example. I think this is kind of what you were saying. I don't think there should be a restriction on restaurants. So where the restaurant is, the restaurant is.
There's not a restriction on restaurants.
Well, there is a restriction with a restaurant with a drive-through
Fast food
within
restaurants?
660 feet
Yeah.
of another one. I'd say
How can
that's-
you make a decision before you hear from the people? How can you've heard from a few people, and how can you make a recommendation before you hear from more
No
people?
offense to the people, but do you think?
That requires a public hearing, right?
Yep.
Which all I'm trying to do is to get us to a point to have public hearing. Is there something we can agree on so that we can get the public hearing? So that we don't have another, like, you guys can meet
I'll keep
privately.
going. I don't think there needs to be a separation of use between any of those that were listed, right? One doesn't knock out another. I do think you
That's
can-
number 1 of management's recommendation.
That's correct. Adjacency, that is correct. That's why I said it's a multitude, it's not just number 4, and you said you agree, it's a multitude of all. Uses individually that were separated, and that's what I said in the beginning, I'm struggling with whether it should be 660 or 1,000. I mean, it's 340 feet, does it really matter? So I'd go with 1,000, I don't care. Because I think you're accomplishing somewhat of what you wanted to accomplish. I'm trying to find a compromise.
I'd like to look at the map. I don't wanna just wing something, I wanna look at the map.
I hear you. So I think that if you've got a storage building, it's 1,000 feet, I'd go with that. I could support that. I had 660 originally, but I can support 1,000, so one storage, they're all 1,000 feet apart.
So-
I'm
Vehicle-
hearing you say you support a 1 and a 4. I'm not trying to short circuit discussion, and I definitely agree that no matter what anything happens, there has to be public involvement, which can only happen in a public hearing. There needs to be some, what do you think about this? It would be a management recommendation, we don't have to do it on this council meeting, it could be the next one and y'all meet in between there if you wanna meet independently to see what is the option that you were wanting to explore with Mr. Bueno, number 4?
See, I think number 1, you've got,
Can you share which one you were wanting to?
I'd like to talk to Watts and Tom. And Jonathan's he's gonna be out, and I don't know that people are gonna wanna show up for a public hearing. in December, I don't know, I don't know, but I just feel a little undermined.
What's the recommended process from tonight? If it moves out of workshop, what happens next?
I think we just need to have something that comes before council. If there's interest in continuing to have this discussion to find a tweak, I just think we need to know what that issue comes before council
So the
as.
next step is a recommendation, a written recommendation.
No, it would be a consensus of 4 members of council to say, this is what we're gonna take up, so that we don't have to have
We're
another
gonna
workshop.
Take up creating a recommendation. And when do we create the recommendation? In between council meetings?
She's asking us to do it
He's
now.
going out on leave.
No,
as
I'm not
well.
asking you to do it now. I'm asking us, how do we avoid another workshop on this? If y'all wanna meet privately, what's the next step for council to take this?
Well, just like the Grand Tree ordinance, you've asked Jonathan to take what Tommy's put together and put together a recommendation to council. Seems to me the next.
No, what's
step
gonna
is-
happen with that is that's gonna just come on, that's gonna be on an agenda item. It's
Yeah.
not gonna be this next one though. It'll be
Okay.
later.
Then I
Well,
think-
then we can take it up, and that can allow public hearing, and then anybody who wants to come speak on it can speak on it, and council can hear all of the differing
Why can't we
positions.
meet and then talk to management and let them make a recommendation? I mean, I don't make a recommendation tonight, we can meet and talk about it and kind of finesse it a little bit, and then let management make a recommendation to council.
The same meeting that planning and zoning is gonna present the Grand Tree ordinance language, could be the same meeting that we present the language. for-
That's not how that's working. It's not a planning and zoning recommendation now. That's already been through. We're going
Then
straight
why
to
are we asking
council.
all due respect, why are we asking planning and zoning to prepare a Grand Tree ordinance for us to consider to pass?
They're basing it on what we're talking about tonight, Watts.
Right.
They're proposing
So we can't come to consensus on what we want in this particular new ordinance. So between this meeting and whenever that's gonna be discussed with the Grand Tree, that needs to be created. So I don't mind taking time out of my schedule. If Tom does, you're asking for Tom, I don't mind sitting down, whoever, let's talk through it and come up with a suggestion. And then we bring that to council for consideration.
Just because they often get overlooked when it comes to these things. Any amendment to the zoning code and the land development code has to go to planning commission first for their recommendation. I just don't want that to be missed.
So then,
We still have a full I'm just trying to figure out how we get this in front of council. If y'all wanna meet and propose what language that's gonna be.
I will. You're asking, and I don't
Yes, I'm
mind.
asking you to. I'd like
Respectfully,
you
I
to.
will. Yes, I will. I think this is important. I think it's important to the citizens of Lake Wiley to have something a little different than what they have, because that's what I'm hearing from both sides.
And I like the 1,000-foot thing, part of that, and maybe breaking up the uses in the 1,000-foot, maybe that's great. But I'd like for us to, I'm not one to not do homework, so I'd like to do a little more homework. I didn't see these proposals until tonight, it's the first time I'm hearing them and seeing them. And so I'd like for us to, and if the two most concerned people, most interested and concerned,
Yeah.
are Tom and
Yeah.
Watts, let's
Let's
Figure
get
it
together
out.
and talk, yeah.
So the three of us can meet. If four, then we're gonna have an issue, right? It's a meeting. But the three of us, I don't mind.
Sounds good. Let's
All right.
do it. Yep.
Do we have any item for executive session?
We do not, we're not updating council on Monday, if that's okay.
Okay,
All right.
I got it, okay.
yeah, no, we're done.
Yeah.
Do we have a motion to adjourn?
Motion to adjourn.
Motion, second, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
We are adjourned.
So, Tom.
Good job.
Good
Madam Chair.
stuff there.
Tommy, I'll still type that up. I
All right.
see it now.